There are many reasons why Final Fantasy VII is heralded as one of the best games of all time, but one of the more interesting elements has always been how fleshed out the world was. Every location had a distinct presence, and there were countless NPCs who helped to make the various locations brim with personality. And this was crucial, as world building was one of the main components used by the development team when building out character backstories. Almost every location resonated with a specific member of the cast, and by playing through certain segments, focus would move away from their overriding objective of stopping Sephiroth, and it would instead shift to characters attempting to tackle their own personal demons. Cosmo Canyon and Rocket Town were used to great effect in this regard, as they allowed us to learn more about the issues Red 13 and Sid Highwind were struggling to overcome. And when venturing to Coral and ending up in the desert prison, the focus was placed firmly on Barret. It was during these segments that we saw the aftermath of the tragic events that turned Barret from being a loyal supporter of Shinra to someone who was hellbent on bringing them down. To work towards this goal, Barret ended up using Avalanche as a platform for his war on Shinra, but the eco-terrorist group were not always the virtuous entity he would have people believe. Indeed, although their roots were pure, they became tainted by individuals with nefarious intent, and they ended up becoming no different from the organisation they claimed was the enemy. Avalanche has its roots in Cosmo Canyon, a place where people often went to gain a deeper understanding about the planet. It was founded not long after the conclusion of the Wutai War, and it was started by an individual who had become concerned about the actions of Shinra and how they might damage the planet's ecosystem. It's unclear how many people were part of the initiative, but this early version of Avalanche made limited progress in their quest against Shinra. That was, until there was a change in leadership. Around the same time as Avalanche was emerging, Professor Hojo, having gained an increased thirst for knowledge, was given an opportunity to test out some theories, as there was another incident that needed to be cleaned up. This time, Calm was the town affected, and Hojo decided to use the wounded to see what would happen if he embedded materia inside humans. One of the test subjects was a girl named Felicia, who happened to be the daughter of Veld, the then leader of the Turks. Hojo placed the incredibly powerful Zirconade summon materia within her hand, but after not seeing the expected result, he discarded Felicia and left her for dead. It was fortunate then that Felicia was found by Fuhito, one of Bugenhagen's students, and brought back to Cosmo Canyon. But although on the surface this seemed like a noble act, the truth was that Fuhito idolized Hojo and he sensed an opportunity. As with every ideology, there are always different interpretations, and there were those within Avalanche who felt that their actions were not extreme enough. Fuhito was one such individual, for while he did share the same basic belief that the planet's ecosystem should be preserved, he felt that in order to achieve this, defeating Shinra was not enough. Instead, he believed that all of humanity would need to be eradicated. This was the only way to stop harm from continuing to befall the planet, as with humanity gone, it would have the time it needed to heal its wounds. Fuhito believed that Felicia would be crucial to these plans, as despite Hojo's assessment that the melding had failed, he noted two positives. One, he now had access to Zirconade, a summon referred to as the World Burner, that he would use to enact his plan. And two, until he was able to figure out how to summon Zirconade, he would wear Felicia down by taking the fight to Shinra and using her superhuman strength to assist with his preparations. This was made all the more easier, as thanks to the horrible ordeal Felicia had been through, she was suffering from severe amnesia, and Fuhito was more than happy to exploit this, bending her to his will. It saw Felicia indoctrinated into the ideologies of those around her, and she joined Avalanche to help in their fight against Shinra, believing it was the right thing to do. Not remembering her name, Felicia was renamed Elfé, and due to her enhanced abilities, she became a valuable asset, with many looking to her as a point of authority. When the leader of Avalanche passed away, Elfé became a natural candidate to fill the void, and with the support of Fuhito and Shears, who was a new addition to the group, her position was solidified. Like her predecessor, Elfé wanted Avalanche to remain true to their original cause of attempting to defeat Shinra so that the planet could be saved, but she also realised that they had been largely ineffective and decided to scale up their operation. Her ambition brought about fundamental changes to Avalanche, and it wasn't too long before they became a much more credible threat to Shinra. But for all their progress, the harsh reality was that they were still undermanned and under-resourced in comparison to their enemy. To help level the playing field, Fuhito began to use his scientific genius to create the Ravens, Avalanche's answer to Soldier, but much like his idol, Hojo, he did so with little care for those around him. Luring them in with the promise of becoming genetically enhanced super soldiers who would feel no pain and heal at abnormal rates, Fuhito manipulated the zealots amongst the group into giving up their humanity and becoming mindless drones who, unbeknownst to Elfé, would have unquestioned loyalty to Fuhito. Avalanche also entered into a mutually beneficial relationship with Rufus Shinra. In exchange for providing funding and access to secret plans, Rufus expected Avalanche to kill his father, President Shinra, so that he could take control of the company. Through these developments, Avalanche were able to sow the seeds of chaos around the world. They attempted to bomb the Sector 8 Mako reactor, took control of the Mako cannon in Junin, and were almost successful in their attempts to assassinate President Shinra. Despite all their efforts though, Shinra remained intact. But when they started to become stretched by other incidents that were happening around the world, Avalanche saw this as an opportunity, and Elfé ordered a strike against the then incomplete Coral Mako reactor. Unlike other reactors, this was much less secure, and it was believed they could learn how it was built before leaking plans around the world. It was a daring move, and in the aftermath there were numerous consequences that would have far-reaching effects. On the surface, Avalanche were assumed to have been left in tatters. Many of their forces were killed, and Rufus was exposed, taken into custody by the Turks, who then placed him under house arrest under the guise of him being on extended assignment overseas. Elfé also became very weakened after regaining some of her memory following a confrontation with her father, and Shears was abandoned, left for dead within the reactor. The only person who escaped was Fuhito, for he had been hoping something of this nature would happen so that he could supplant Elfé and assume charge of Avalanche in an official capacity. After the incident in Coral, Fuhito was left infused. Avalanche were now a threat on a global scale, and anyone who opposed his dictatorial reign either left the group or was turned into a raven for their troubles. But after he retreated, Fuhito came to the realization that, even though Elfé was now powerless to stop him, he did not possess the knowledge needed to summon Zirconade. It saw him venture to Cosmo Canyon, where he blackmailed Bugenhagen into revealing what he knew, and armed with newfound knowledge, he sent his mindless ravens around the world to acquire the resources that were needed. During this time, Shinra was attempting to hold ground against Avalanche's assaults, but they were also dealing with something of an internal crisis as the Turks had become a liability. Upon learning Felicia was still alive, Veld chose to leave the organization, choosing instead to try and aid his daughter, and many other members sympathized, also turning their backs on Shinra. President Shinra was outraged by these actions and demanded that the Turks be hunted down and executed. But despite their best efforts, the Turks were able to evade and often outmaneuver Shinra, all while they attempted to also stop Fuhito's plans from coming to fruition. It was a complicated and messy situation, all brought about by fanaticism born out of Avalanche's initial ideals, and by using his ravens, Fuhito was able to gain the momentum against his various foes and succeed in his quest, but only to a point. Zirconade was summoned, yes, but it was incomplete. This infuriated Fuhito, as he was so close to achieving his goal, and so, consumed by his contemptuous rage, Fuhito merged the Zirconade materia with his body, with the hope of offering it as a sacrifice after he dealt with what he no doubt deemed to be troublesome pests. This was also a success, and Fuhito perished as Zirconade manifested. Yet for all his brilliance, Fuhito could not have predicted that this would be where his plan would fail. But fail it did, as the remaining members of the Turks proceeded to vanquish Zirconade, saving the planet from destruction. It brought about a poetic end to that chapter in the history of Avalanche, as remnants of Shinra, the company Avalanche believed would bring about the destruction of the planet, were the reason the planet was saved. But this act was not without consequence. Part of Sector 6 was destroyed, many members of the Turks went into hiding, fearing Shinra would not give them a second chance, and with Fuhito now gone, those who believed in the original mission Avalanche was founded upon found themselves in an interesting position, and one such individual was Barret Wallace. After the incident at the Coral Mako reactor, an unfortunate spotlight was shone on the town. Even though the reactor had been destroyed, Shinra began to fear that specifications of the reactor could still leak, and they wanted to cover up what had happened, lest it damage people's faith in the company. In keeping with their policies relating to these concerns, Shinra decided to purge the village so that nobody would talk. It saw men, women, and children slain, but 2 members of the community, Barret and Dine, survived the harrowing assault, even if parts of their arms were destroyed as a consequence. Separated, they both ended up taking rather different paths. Dine stayed in Coral even after it was converted into a prison, and he was driven insane by thoughts of what had happened. But Barret, he wanted to take a more philosophical route and made his way to Cosmo Canyon. It was here that he learned more about the planet, and from those who had absconded following Fuhito's rise, he also learned about Avalanche and their mission to save the planet, which painted Shinra as the enemy. Even though he had once been a strong advocate of Shinra and their practices, following their betrayal, Barret now sought to destroy the company at any cost, and he decided to use the Avalanche name as it provided a platform that could be used to channel his aggression. It saw Barret relocate to Midgar so that he could be closer to the source, and he started to build up a small crew of like-minded people, which included Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge. But with Elfé and Fuhito now gone, Avalanche as a whole reverted back to its earlier days of being nothing more than a nuisance to Shinra, albeit with much better gear than they once had, and Barret was labelled as an extremist for wanting to take more direct action. It was a reputation he lived up to though, as after finding some of Fuhito's plans for bombing the Sector 1 Mako reactor within an old Avalanche safehouse, he delivered upon them. In the aftermath, Barret showed a lack of care for the unknown number of civilians who were either killed or maimed following the explosion, and blinded by his quest for revenge, he pressed ahead with plans for a second strike with little care for the consequences. But unlike Fuhito, Barret was saved from himself by the actions of others, and after he yet again saw how swift, decisive and cold Shinra could be, his version of Avalanche no longer had a reason to exist. That though, is a story for another time. For now, we hope you enjoyed this exploration into Avalanche. Honestly, it's going to be very interesting to see how much more they flesh Avalanche out within the Final Fantasy VII Remake, with Barret's crew considered a cell of the wider group. If you did enjoy the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, as we've got some very interesting Final Fantasy VII Remake videos on the horizon. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.